Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle. Above me here on the screen is Joe Clark, and we're going to dive into three of the biggest Steelers-related topics of the week. We're coming to you on Friday because of some scheduling conflicts. Couldn't fit the episode in on Thursday, but that will continue to be our normal slot. Thank you guys for tuning in this week. We're going to recap the Steelers 31-17 was it? I'm already getting mixed up here. 31-17 loss to the Seattle Seahawks in week 2. Then we're going to preview their week 3 matchup against the New England Patriots. And, of course, go over the injury report for both teams ahead of this game. Joe, a lot of the hype came crashing down after that week 2 game, and I think it was very winnable. It's one of those odd games where it probably shouldn't have been winnable based on how both teams were playing, because the Seahawks really were outperforming the Steelers in most ways. But regardless of that, it was winnable until about, 14 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter is when everything kind of fell apart there with that kickoff gaffe by Kaleb Johnson. So where do you want to start in this game? And I don't know. Are you having like the sky is falling type of vibe like everyone else seems to have with this team right now?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think the sky is falling, but I want to start with, the run defense, because I know we talked about last week whether this is going to be a get-right game. The Seahawks struggled to run the ball week 1, but that's kind of what their identity wants to be with Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker III. And the Steelers didn't really do a good job of stopping that. And so I think back-to-back weeks where the run defense struggles. I know Mike Tomlin said one time, not the exact quote, but one time's not a mirage. Second time is a trend. Something along those lines is a common Mike Tomlin quote. And so the fact that the run defense struggled again is the only thing that would get me to maybe consider like, hey, maybe this team's not as good as we think it is. But I don't have a sky is falling vibe. I mean, I think Seattle's a pretty good team. But the Steelers did allow a lot of, the guy like Cooper Kupp had over 90 yards. You allowed, Kenneth Walker to go over 100 yards. You allowed Sam Darnold to, look really, really good against you. And in your home opener, you'd think, after the defense struggled week 1, that's not what you want to see. And then on the offensive side of the ball, Seattle took away a lot of what was working for the Steelers in week 1. I mean, Mike McDonald's a great defensive mind. We saw it when he was with the Ravens, but still not a promising sign that, I kind of made fun of a lot of the criticism of Aaron Rodgers in week 1. Well, all of his touchdowns were schemed up and they were this and that. Well, in week 2, the plays that were schemed up, Seattle took away. So they did a good job, during the week in tape study taking away, and they were down some of their top cornerbacks. So that obviously wasn't a good sign, but again, I don't think the sky is falling. I think this team can get back on track, and I think, we'll talk about throughout the show. I think a lot of the issues that they had are, pretty correctable. So I'm not extremely concerned, but given the fact that they have to get off to a hot start, the Patriots in week 3 are, a pretty solid opponent. So I'm not super confident, but I don't think the sky is falling.
Yeah, going back to what you were talking about with the run defense, I think an interesting stat to point out here is the fact that the Steelers have allowed 299 yards, which, first of all, they've only allowed that through their first 2 games. 4 times in the Mike Tomlin era. This is an Alex Kozora stat. 0 times during the Bill Cowher era, and 3 times during the Chuck Noll era. So it's become a troubling trend in recent years for Tomlin. That's happened over the last 12 years here, 2014, 2018, 2023, and 2025. And so the frequency of that, unfortunately, is picking up. But in terms of the individual runs, the Steelers on a play-to-play basis are actually performing okay. It's just that they're allowing the chunk plays I think it's 68 total attempts against them for 299 yards. 58 of those attempts have gone for 139 yards, which is a 2.4 average per play. And then there are 10 explosive runs of 10 or more yards, totaling 160 yards for a 16 average. So it really is just these breakdowns that are happening, and none was more infuriating than 3rd and goal from the 19 and Kenneth Walker punching that in. You saw Peyton Wilson take a bad angle. He tried to go around a block, but to the inside and kind of put himself out of the play. Patrick Queen kind of did the same. And Queen talked about that play, and he wasn't going to call anybody else out. He kind of fell on the sword and said, well, I probably could have been aligned a little bit closer to the play side. He was keying on the tight end, I think he said, A.J. Barner, who had hurt them earlier in the game. And he probably should have been aligned a little closer to the wide side of the field where, Walker ended up gashing them for a 19-yard touchdown there to basically put the final nail in the coffin of that game. And so that play was really just a kind of a microcosm of all of their run defense woes so far. But I think it is fixable. I think we kind of underrate how much they're missing somebody like a Derek Harmon and how much they're missing Deshaun Elliott. He was like their leading tackler prior to getting injured there in week 1. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there's still hope for sure with the defense. I'm not willing to give up on the defense. I think they're too talented to be performing as poorly as they are. I mean, right now they're, the third worst in the league in points and yards or something of that nature. It's just ugly, and I don't think that is going to continue. I actually thought what Darius Slay said about the whole situation was interesting because if you remember back to last year, the Philadelphia Eagles, 3 or 4 games in, everybody wanted Nick Sirianni fired. Their defense was performing terribly. They had all this talent that everybody thought was going to amount to a good team, and they weren't really performing that well. And they come out of the bye, and they turn into the league's number 1 defense by the end of the year. I don't know if the turnaround is going to be that spectacular here in Pittsburgh, but it's possible. It's, we have a literal example from just a year ago with another team. And so I think it is important to keep that in perspective. And overall, where else should we? I think Keeanu Benton is an interesting conversation. He's kind of been the scapegoat or just everyone's kind of been pointing to him as culprit number 1 for the team's issues on defense. And some of that is fair. I think he's been getting pushed around a little bit too much. He isn't holding up at the point of attack. He's getting, kind of, there's a couple plays where he tried to do like a spin move type thing against double teams and just kind of got washed out of the hole altogether. It just has not looked good. And I know there's been a lot of chatter about, is he miscast as a nose tackle or should he be more of a 3-tech or a defensive end in this system? And I think that answer is starting to become more clear. Jerry Dulac saying that someone within the Steelers building basically said that they think Keeanu Benton has regressed. And so after that promising rookie season, last year wasn't great. This year, they're thinking he's even regressed further. And so maybe some changes on the horizon there.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if they make a change if this continues with Benton. I know even last week, Terrell Austin talked about maybe Y.A. Black having the flexibility to play across the defensive line. If the team gets more comfortable with him, I know it's early, and Austin also said they don't want to overload him with stuff early. But if Benton continues to play this way, I could see Black filling that role. I mean, he has the size for it, and I think he could be pretty productive in that role. Yeah, with Benton, I think, we've talked about in the past how his club over move is really good, but he doesn't really have an array of moves to kind of get into the backfield. And I wonder if some of this is him trying to, work on new pass rush moves or new moves just to get in the backfield. And a lot of that is him, struggling and getting washed because he hasn't, worked on them enough as he has, his club over. So I'm a little worried that he's trying new stuff in the game that's just simply not working. He's getting washed in the run game. He's not been an effective pass rusher at all. So maybe that will improve. We'll see. But I do think Y.A. Black could definitely have more of a role along the nose tackle throughout the season, especially if Benton continues to struggle. And even if he gets a little bit better, it might not be bad to not just have the one full-time nose tackle and have Black come in and play a little bit more.
Yeah, Keeanu Benton's listed at 309 pounds on the Steelers website, and Y.A. Black is listed at 336, I think. And so when he was drafted, it was like, oh, this is finally the big space-eating, nose tackle to hold down the middle of the Steelers' defensive line that they've been missing for years. And pretty quickly, defensive line coach Carl Dunbar vouched for Benton and basically said, no, we already have a pretty good nose tackle, and we view Y.A. Black as more of a 4-eye kind of defensive end in this system. And so it seems like they've kind of gone back on that, back and forth. And I think Terrell Austin admitted last week they don't necessarily have fully decided what they want to do with Black in the future, but I think it's kind of the case is being made without really much having to be done by Black. Benton's kind of playing himself out of a job there. So, yeah, hopefully he can bounce back, and hopefully if he does lose the starting nose tackle job, they can find other ways to use him. I think there's still talent there for sure. I don't want to just write him off as a total bust at this point, but he has not been productive at all. I mean, he's in his third season, he started 25 games for the team, 36 games he's appeared in. He only has 75 total tackles, just 3 tackles for loss. I mean, that is very bad production overall. And then 2 sacks, 17 quarterback hits. So he has, generated some pressure, but just not good to only have 3 tackles for loss when your job is to kind of make sure you're not getting pushed back. So another interesting conversation I wanted to have is surrounding Kaleb Johnson. Of course, he was probably the biggest turning point in the game, was him allowing a kickoff to land in the landing zone, roll back into the end zone, and get recovered by Seattle Seahawks running back George Halani for a free touchdown. Mike Tomlin basically said he's removing him from the kick return unit, and is that the right call? Is it the right call to shake a player's confidence? If he isn't playing kick return, will he even get a helmet? Is that going to shake his confidence? How are they going to get this guy involved this year?
That's a great question. I mean, I do think removing him from kick return is the right decision, because even before his gaffe, he wasn't really doing anything on kick return. He had the fumble in week 1. He wasn't, picking up the yardage that we've seen kick returners around the league pick up, especially with the new rules. I think he was kind of miscast as a kick returner. He only did it, I believe, 2 times his last 2 years in college and none last year. He had 12 his freshman year. But again, I mean, that was still a decently long time ago. So I think he's a little bit miscast in that kick return role. And then if he's not returning kicks and he had 2 offensive snaps for the first 2 weeks, then yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to get a helmet. Will that shake his confidence? Maybe. I think a lot of it depends on how they handle things internally within the locker room. And, I mean, guys have continued to pump him up in the media and say it's not his fault after the game, and, post game, and have, supporting him. Jabril Peppers, Alex tweeted out his arm around and was talking to him after. And Peppers is a guy who's been in that role before. So I'm less concerned about it shaking his confidence, but I am a little concerned about what are we going to get from him this year. I mean, he's a 3rd-round pick at a position of need. You would like to expect to see that guy, have more of a role. And there's a lot of hype about him early in camp. And we've talked about maybe, a 3-headed backfield with Jaylen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, and Kaleb Johnson. But now it just seems a lot less likely that Johnson's going to have a meaningful contribution, probably until, at least until after the bye, which it's an early bye. It's week 5, but I think it's going to be a little bit before they really start to feature Johnson and give him more of a role. And I'm not sure I agree with that. I think maybe he deserves more offensive snaps just to see what he can do maybe. But he hasn't really taken advantage of the ones he's gotten this far to earn those snaps, and given that the Steelers like to make their rookies kind of try to earn their reps. It's understandable, but I do think that Johnson can provide a little bit more of this team, especially in the red zone. I mean, Jaylen Warren and Gainwell aren't great runners, in the short red zone. I think Johnson could kind of fulfill that role a little bit better. But it doesn't seem as if he's going to, really be a factor for this team anytime soon.
Yeah, Kenneth Gainwell's had 12 rushing attempts through the first 2 games. Johnson just 2 for -1 yard. And yeah, it is odd because you don't want to reward a player who's failed at his really only responsibility on kick return. But at the same time, you said it. They drafted him in the 3rd round. He was their 2nd pick of this draft because they didn't have a 2nd-round pick. Yeah, I think he was the 6th running back taken of 25 that were drafted in what was billed as basically the best running back class in years. So yeah, this is a guy you draft. You don't draft a running back that high unless the plan is to get them involved in year 1. And you go back to Arthur Smith calling him the perfect fit for his offense. You go back to Arthur Smith talking about having to pivot off of his scheme last year because they didn't have the personnel to execute it. Well, guess what? Jaylen Warren was on the team last year, meaning, he didn't necessarily view Jaylen Warren as the perfect guy to execute it. And I think Warren himself was asked this past week which runs he prefers, and Warren, prefers to kind of be between the tackles and downhill runner. I think he has more burst than somebody like Najee Harris, but yeah, Kaleb Johnson is what can really unlock Arthur Smith's full preferred offensive scheme if he can get up to speed this year. And I just struggle to see how that's going to happen at this point unless they just take the plunge, and maybe it doesn't look great for a couple weeks, but you got to get him up to speed and getting him used to the speed of the game. And I think that's why they had him on kick return to begin with. It was a kind of a cop-out way to, all right, you can get used to kind of the speed of the game, especially in this condensed kickoff thing that kind of operates more like an outside zone run play to begin with, in the way that those things are blocked these days. So yeah, I am kind of leaning towards wanting to see him, maybe not this week, but yeah, certainly after the bye, if you can get him more involved, at least 5 to 7 carries per game would be great. And, I think that can even eat into Kenneth Gainwell's carries. I like Gainwell. I think he can contribute as a receiver, but we just haven't really seen anything as a rusher yet. It seems to not really go so well when he gets the ball in those situations. 5 attempts for 20 yards this past week for Gainwell, but one of those was a 10-yard run in garbage time. So really it was 4 for 10, which is a much worse average there if you kind of take out that garbage time run towards the end of the game. So I think that sums up our Week 2 conversation. Let's move on to previewing the Patriots, and this is a team that kind of has a similar performance so far to the Steelers in some ways different, but their defense is really struggling in a lot of ways. They're allowing the 26th most yards in the league, 19th in points. So the Steelers are actually ranked worse than them in both categories at the moment. Their offense is a little bit better than the Steelers at the moment, with 14th rank in points and 13th in yards. And there's a lot of familiarity between these two teams. Arthur Smith familiar with Mike Vrabel, Mike Tomlin familiar with Josh McDaniels. They've played against each other several times. Arthur Smith coached under Vrabel in Tennessee for a number of years, and so I think it's another one of those weeks where last week Mike Macdonald got the better of the Steelers with that familiarity, and is that going to happen again? Joe, where do you want to start with this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing to start is the Steelers have had almost no success against the Patriots basically through my entire lifetime, and especially when they go to New England. They haven't had a winner since 2008 when Matt Castle was the quarterback after Tom Brady tore his ACL week 1. Not to say that's a mental block, given the fact that they have to go to New England. It's basically, I mean, it's obviously a whole new roster, mostly a new roster since the last time they played the Patriots too, even. But the Patriots have had the Steelers' number over the last few years, and obviously Bill Belichick's gone, and now it's Mike Vrabel. And I think the familiarity with Vrabel and Smith is kind of going to cancel each other out. I mean, Vrabel is more of a defensive guy, but Smith can also, he knows what Vrabel likes. Vrabel knows what Smith likes. It's whatever. I'm not too concerned about that. From the Steelers' angle, what I am concerned about is the fact that the Patriots' run game did seem to pick up last week against Miami. Ramondre Stevenson had a good game on the ground and a pretty solid game catching the football in the backfield, kind of like Jaylen Warren. They have Travion Henderson, who they haven't really unleashed a lot through the first 2 weeks. He has struggled with holding penalties, which has kind of hurt his ability to stay on the field. But I think Travion Henderson's a dynamic back. So I am worried about the Patriots' run game. Drake May, to this point, might be the best quarterback the team has played through 3 weeks. I mean, I don't think he's going to do what Justin Fields did, but he is adept with his legs. He's probably the best, pure passer of the football that the Steelers have played thus far. So I'm nervous for this game for sure, no doubt. I mean, I think the key maybe will be if Christian Gonzalez comes back, because if Christian Gonzalez does return, he's been limited in practice the last 2 days, which does give it, a pretty good sign he might return, but the Patriots and Vrabel are kind of coy with the injury report, so I also wouldn't be shocked if he didn't play. But if Gonzalez does play, then they have him and Carlton Davis as their 2 top cornerbacks. I would assume Christian Gonzalez would travel with DK Metcalf. Carlton Davis can lock up whoever's on the outside for the Steelers this week. So those are 2 very good cornerbacks. So I'm a little bit concerned going against this Patriots defense. But the fact that they are, they have struggled a little bit. Tua Tagovailoa had a decent week against them. Tua threw a bad late pick to Marte Mapu. The Raiders actually looked pretty good against them in week 1, and the Raiders offense didn't look great in week 2, but they get after the passer. Harold Landry, I think they lead the NFL in sacks for 2 weeks. Harold Landry has 3.5. Milton Williams, I think, has 2 or 2.5, something like that. So they're a team that can collapse the pocket and get after the passer. I think, given what we've seen from the Steelers so far, the Patriots' strengths kind of counteract what the Steelers' weaknesses have been. So the Steelers have to show us that, they can block, they can protect for Rodgers, and that they can stop the run, which they haven't shown so far. And the fact that it's the Patriots. Maybe I'm scarred growing up so close to Gillette Stadium that I just kind of dread when they play the Patriots each week. But I'm nervous for this game for sure.
Yeah, Harold Landry tied for the league lead in sacks at 3.5 and played primarily on the left end. So he's going to be going against those of you worried about Broderick Jones. You're not going to see a ton of Landry against Jones, although they have other good rushers. But Landry mostly going to be against Troy Fautanu, which is probably a little bit better matchup there for the Steelers, though I think Fautanu's had his own struggles so far this year. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting matchup. If Christian Gonzalez is able to play, probably one of the best young corners in the league. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy much. I think he'd be have a lot more hype surrounding him if he'd kind of been on the field more. And I think he matches up well with somebody like DK Metcalf. Metcalf hasn't really been able to overcome some of those top corners against him thus far. The only way he's really been able to get yards are on these screens or these quick passes to the perimeter where he just kind of gets yak. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about somebody who desperately needs a bounce back game, I think it's DK Metcalf. This guy's dropped. You can argue how many he's dropped, but there have been a couple of. I think the first game there were 3 or 4 that hit him in the hands. Some of them were kind of broken up, or maybe the defender got there early. Last week he had another drop or 2. So this is a guy who needs to have a big game. He probably does not like the fact that he had a poor game against his previous team, and so I'm sure he's itching to come out here and prove why the Steelers traded a second-round pick for him and gave him, $33 million a year or something in that neighborhood. So where else in this game? I think Jaylen Warren, just from all of, I guess, what Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith and even Aaron Rodgers, what they've been saying, it feels like Jaylen Warren's going to be a bigger part of the game plan. So those of you that have been wanting a heavier focus on the run, or even just kind of check down or design passing plays to the running back and screens, it seems like they want to get the ball in Jaylen Warren's hand. Aaron Rodgers called the, 65-yard play that he had one of the best he's ever seen in terms of a catch and run. He compared it to a Donald Driver play from 2010 and dug up that play, and it was very impressive. I think, honestly, Jaylen Warren's was more impressive. Just the fact that he wasn't able to punch it in for the touchdown kind of dings him there. And, of course, the fact that he fell short on that touchdown came back to bite them because was it the next play or a couple plays later? I think it was a couple plays later. Calvin Austin attempted to catch what should have been a touchdown to Pat Freiermuth, and of course it got intercepted. So, yeah, I think Jaylen Warren, Mike Tomlin said that they certainly could see a bigger role for him. I think Arthur Smith made some comments as well. Aaron Rodgers, it seems like everybody is in line with that Jaylen Warren needs to touch the ball more. How many has he had through the first couple of games here? I mean, this past week, between running and receiving, he actually had pretty good production overall. Let's see. This past week, he had 14 attempts for 48 yards on the ground and 4 receptions for 86 yards through the air. And so that's the kind of stat line you want to see from him. Maybe a little bit more towards the rushing side than the receiving side, but a combined total of, 134 yards, I think that is. 134 yards. You'd like to see him finish that play for a touchdown. But, yeah, I think that's more of what we could hopefully expect from Warren is, maybe he doesn't get 100-yard rushing games, but maybe all-purpose. We're talking about over 100 in most games. What do you think?
I fully agree, and I think this week especially, last week, Robert Spillane, former Steeler, he kind of struggled defending the pass game when he was lined up against Devon Achane. Achane's obviously a very dynamic back, but Warren is a very good receiving back as well. So I think we can kind of see Warren, maybe on some Texas routes in the middle of the field. I think he'll stay involved in the passing game, and I do think he will be the focal point of the run game. And I think if he can get going, then maybe I'll change my tune, and the Steelers, I think, will have a much better chance of winning this game if Warren can get going. The Patriots linebacker play has been an issue in the past, so they brought in Spillane. But yeah, through 2 weeks, he hasn't been, anything spectacular. He was good in Las Vegas, but his New England tenure has been a little bit rough so far. So I'm hoping Warren can get going, especially, in the passing game early on like he did last week. and kind of pick up some of those chunk yardage because the Steelers have, I mean, in the ground game, the Steelers haven't had a chunk run. I think Gainwell's run last week in garbage time was the longest run the Steelers have had this year. I
Yep.
think it might be their only double-digit run all season as well. So,
Yep.
hoping that Warren can kind of maybe make his mark early in this game and build off some momentum, and kind of help carry the Steelers' offense. Really,
Yeah, I think there was some, I guess, tempered expectations around Warren because last year was not his best year, but he was really dealing with injuries for a lot of last year, and he had Najee Harris ahead of him, and I just think it wasn't the best recipe for him to be successful. But I think he's starting to maybe show why the Steelers not only tendered him but then extended him, which was a bit of a surprise, the extension at least. So yeah, I think things are trending in a positive direction for the run game. You obviously need to see, we want to see them have over 100 yards rushing as a team at least in one of these games before we can label it them turning the corner. But I think we started to see some of that from Warren. The only reason we didn't see more of it was the kind of flow of the game. It didn't really work in the Steelers' favor in terms of time of possession and stringing drives together and stuff like that. So another interesting thing, the Steelers now have a couple of former Patriots on their team. They signed Jabril Peppers last week. He didn't play at all in the game. Kind of seems like he will be playing this week based on what I think Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin have said about him. And then they signed linebacker Jawan Bentley. This is a guy who was a team captain for the Patriots for, I think, four different years. I think he was a team captain for them. He played for them for quite a while and won a Super Bowl even. So this is another former Patriot that can kind of help put his hand in the pile. I don't know if he'll play this week. Probably not. He's on the practice squad, so they'd have to elevate him. So we'll know on Saturday whether or not he's going to play. But at the very least, they could pick his brain a little bit and get some intel on maybe some of how those linemen are. He practiced against them every day. So, Joe, anything to add there?
yeah, no, they added Matt Sokol too, another former Patriot, to the practice squad. I don't think Bentley's going to play a lot this week, given Terrell Austin's comments yesterday. They kind of said they're working to get him just back into football shape. He hasn't been with the team all off season, so I would be a little bit surprised if he came up. But I mean, the Steelers are kind of doing what the Patriots have done. It's escaping me what his name is, but the Patriots did sign. It was the week of the game they played against them, that the Nelson Aguilar catch. I believe that was 2022. They promoted a Steelers outside linebacker to the active roster, I think, off their practice squad, or signed him the week of the game. So, whatever intel you can get is obviously good intel. Bentley's a guy that's been there a while, but again, new coaching staff. So not completely the same. But I like what both Peppers and Bentley can offer. Peppers, I think, will play more this week after he didn't log any defensive snaps last week. Kind of getting acclimated to the team. I think this week we'll see him play at least a handful. And then Bentley, even down the line, I think he's a good guy to have, especially given your run defense struggles. He's been a really good run defender, downhill thumping linebacker, a little bit in the Landon Roberts mode, and that's a guy he learned under in New England too. So now, I mean, obviously a little bit older now, but I think he'd be a pretty solid veteran for the Steelers to have down the line at linebacker. So I'm a fan of those moves, and I do like kind of bringing in former Patriots just for that fact.
Yeah, both of those guys more run defenders than they are really pass. So, maybe the Steelers kind of signaling, all right, well, if this keeps continuing, we're gonna have to make some changes, and maybe these are two of the changes they would make. So, all right, we're gonna move into the injuries for Week 3 and just brush through these quickly. Max Sharping, a depth interior offensive lineman for the Steelers, went to IR. He suffered an ACL injury in practice. This is a guy who had been inactive on game day. Was it both weeks he was inactive?
I believe so.
So, not a huge loss, but you do want to have offensive line depth. And so, you don't want to see anyone get injured for the entire year. I don't think that move's been made official yet. And so we'll probably see that and a corresponding move maybe on Saturday, I would imagine. And maybe they'll even, I don't know. They have 8 other offensive linemen that they can make active. And so maybe they take this opportunity to just go ahead and sign somebody like Bentley if they think he's ready. I don't know. We'll see. More likely probably going to be an offensive lineman that they backfill that depth with. But for the Steelers, it seems like Joey Porter Jr., Deshaun Elliott, Alex Highsmith will not be playing. I think the latter two are definitely not going to be playing. Joey Porter, he kind of hoped he would. I mean, Mike Tomlin downplayed that, just some hamstring tightness after he exited the game in week one, and so it seems like a little more than hamstring tightness because now he's going to miss probably his second game. He has not practiced all week. Derek Harmon has been limited throughout the week, and so we're probably talking about him. Well, today's injury report will be telling. It sounds like he will play, but probably limited. The coaches aren't quite ready to give him a full slate of work. They said he needs to get back into football shape and all of that. This will be his NFL debut, so it makes sense to kind of slow roll him back into the lineup. But hopefully we get to see the Steelers' first-round pick make his debut. Joe, anything on the Patriots side?
Yeah, Christian Gonzalez, we talked about earlier, he's the key name. He was limited both Wednesday and Thursday. Again, today, like with Harmon, it will be key to see how much he's really playing. He's probably going to end up being questionable. Like I said earlier, Mike Vrabel and the Patriots are pretty coy with the injury report, so we won't get anything, hard probably right up until the inactives are announced on Gonzalez's status. Keon White missed the first practice with an illness. He returned in full yesterday. He could play opposite of Harold Landry, but Cleveland Chasen's also another option there. He's been limited, I believe, both days. Those are kind of the key names. I think there's no real risk of anybody. Christian Barmore was limited, I believe, or he's either limited or out the first day with a non-injury related issue, returned in full yesterday. So he'll be back after missing last year. Blood clots. He's a big run stuff from the middle. Yeah, Gonzalez is really the key. Like we said, he'll probably follow DK Metcalf, and him and Carlton Davis are both going to be that would be one of the top corner duos in the league if both guys are healthy. Davis was also limited, but I don't think there's any doubt about his status. I think he was listed with an Achilles. I think he's going to play. So, yeah, the Patriots are a pretty healthy bunch coming in. So Gonzalez is really going to be the guy to watch for when inactives come out at 11:30 on Sunday morning.
All right, we'll move into our listener question. If you want to have a question answered, that number's at the bottom of the screen and in the video description. That's 412-254-3145. You can call or text. Just tell us your name, where you're from, and a brief question that we can answer on a future episode. This one's actually a text question from Michael Adesso, somebody who's followed Steelers Depot for quite some time, a familiar name around here. He's asked some questions to us before over the offseason, so thank you, Michael, for the question. And here it is. Ross, last week you mentioned Broderick Jones's biggest issue was his hand use and his lack of punch. I just finished watching a cut-up of all of his snaps Sunday, and I was pleasantly surprised on that front. Not perfect, obviously, but seemed to be much better in that area. Thoughts? Well, Michael, I've been debating whether to give you the optimistic take or the maybe realistic take here on Broderick Jones using his hands. Of course, it's a good sign that, yes, I agree, he did actually punch a little bit better than normal in this past game. But I was reviewing some of my film room breakdowns last year, and I wrote one at the beginning of the season called Broderick Jones's No Good, Terrible, Very Bad Day, or whatever the children's book name is that I borrowed that title from, and outlined a lot of his issues with the punch. And then I think it was 4 or 5 weeks later, I wrote one kind of praising him for turning the corner and he's punching. And so I'm just a little worried that it's been a little up and down, and sometimes he does it correctly, sometimes he doesn't. And I still think he had a pretty rough game overall, though, you do want to see him at least start to do some of the coaching points and, first significant contact punch stuff that he's taught to do. So I guess it's obviously a positive thing, but I do caution you thinking he's turned the corner. Maybe it's different because he's on the left side and he's finally getting used to how to punch with that, outside left arm instead of his right arm on the right side there. So I don't know. Mixed feelings about Broderick. Anything to add there, Joe?
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly with what you said. It just seems like sometimes it's mentally. So like in his head, he knows what to do. He knows what he's supposed to be doing, but sometimes it's just a lapse. So I'm a little concerned about his consistency. Hopefully he can continue to stay consistent. But yeah, I wasn't super impressed with his game Sunday, but in the aspect of his hands and trying to make the first contact, I do think he was better.
Indeed. I'm probably going to end up doing a film room on him after this week. I didn't want to do back-to-back because we had one on him after week 1. Want to give it a little bit of time. Don't want to be too knee-jerk with any improvements or any regressions, and so I'll probably end up breaking him down after this game, so long as there's something interesting to break down. Hopefully, well, I don't know. I kind of hope he has a nondescript game that forces me to not break that down, because more often than not, that means something has gone wrong, but I will reserve judgment there. Again, if you want to have a question answered, 412-254-3145, you can give us a call or you can text that number, and we will answer your question on a future episode. We'll be back to Thursdays next week. Hopefully the Steelers will be 2-1 after the game against the Patriots, and the following week is going to be in Ireland. So a lot of interesting storylines to discuss next week as well. We hope you guys enjoy this weekend of NFL football. I am Ross, that is Joe, and we will catch you guys next time.